Tyrell's hands never left the steering wheel. Not when the flashing lights screamed into his rearview mirror, not when the cruiser door slammed shut behind the cop, and not when the first question wasn't license or registration, but whose car is this really? That question didn't echo. It hung, dense, wet, sour in the air, like a question that had been waiting years to be asked by the wrong man to the right one. You're not watching a traffic stop. You're watching a reckoning filmed in 4K, streamed to millions, and yet somehow, no one saw what actually happened. The body cam footage begins like any other. Slow steps on hot asphalt, the low hum of idling engines, birds chirping over the breathless hush of an afternoon that smells like melted tar and old arguments. But freeze it, right there, 7 seconds in, when Officer Bradham leans into the driver's side window of a matte black S-Class Mercedes. Look closely. Tyrell's lips move, just once, no sound, but whatever he says. Officer Bradham recoils. Just slightly, it's subtle, so damn subtle that even seasoned analysts missed it. But you didn't. You felt it. Something shifted. Not in the video. In you. Like when you walk into a room and just know someone was talking about you. That wrong kind of silence. That sixth sense we pretend we don't believe in. Now here's where it gets dark. 10 minutes after the stop, Officer Bradham radioed dispatch. Said the vehicle was clear. No violations, no arrests, no citations. Standard procedure. But he never returned to the precinct. His dash cam shuts off at 4:31 p.m. His radio last pinged a cell tower 5 blocks from the site. His cruiser was found. The next morning, driver's door still open, engine off, body cam footage scrubbed clean. Not redacted, not corrupted, erased. But there's this one file, a backup feed nobody knew was running, found buried inside a retired crime lab server in Des Moines. No one was supposed to access it. And yet, here we are. You, me, this feed. This glitch in the system that shows something the others don't. Watch Tyrell's eyes, not his face. His eyes. There's something behind them. Not rage. Not fear. Memory. Like he's seen this before. Like he knew this stop was coming. Like he's lived it over and over again. Until one day, he whispered something only the cop could hear. And that something pulled a man out of reality, like a thread ripped from a tightly wound shirt. And here's what no one can explain. That night, Bradham's wife got a phone call, a blocked number, a voice she swears was her husband's, calling from a number that hasn't existed since 2004, the year his twin brother died in Iraq. He whispered only one word before the line went dead. It was Tyrell's name, and in the background was a baby crying. A baby they never had. So the question is, what did Tyrell whisper at the window? And why does it feel like, if you listen close enough, you already know? The phone call, Tyrell's name whispered over a line that never should have existed, was supposed to be the key, the unbreakable proof that reality itself had folded in on this stop, on this moment. But as the hours stretched into a restless, sleepless blur, that call became the first thread to unravel everything you thought you knew. Because when Tyrell's lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Cassie Monroe, started pulling at the loose ends, she found holes where facts should have been. Blank spots in timelines, erased files where data was meant to live forever, and a personal journal of Tyrell's, half filled with scrawled dates and names, half smeared like ink running from too many tears or maybe something darker. And none of it added up. If you think this is a story about a racist cop pulled over by a black CEO, think again. This is a story about what they don't want you to remember. The truth behind what no one tells you when the cameras stop rolling, when the eyes stop watching, and the silence thickens like a fog you can't shake. Cassie first reached out to Tyrell 3 days after the stop. No reply. Then, when she found him in his penthouse suite, the man who was supposed to be a titan of industry was a ghost of himself. His eyes darted, his voice trembled, and there was a kind of fractured urgency in the way he spoke, like he was trying to convince himself he was awake and sane at the same time. He told Cassie in a low, haunted voice, "It's like Like, the world flipped inside me and now I'm looking out, not in. I don't know what's real anymore. And it wasn't just the cops or the files or the call that warped his mind. It was the sound, an echo he caught in recordings he swore weren't there before. In the background of his own press interviews, faint static whispers that weren't part of the tape. Sometimes when no one else was around, his phone would glitch. No calls, no texts, just static, then a breath, his name, a sigh, and then silence. Cassie tried to ground him. She pulled up every video, every report, every pixel of the day's events. But with every playback, Tyrell insisted something was off. "The footage changes," he said. "Look closely. Sometimes the officer's face blurs for a moment, like he's not really there. And sometimes I'm not in the driver's seat. Someone else is." She watched, her brow furrowed, trying to find the trick, the glitch, the manipulation. But the files were clean, too clean maybe. Like the truth was being scrubbed out with surgical precision. That's when the doubt started creeping into her own mind. Cassie was no stranger to high-stakes cases, to the brutal underbelly of corruption and systemic rot. But this was different. There was a palpable dread in the air that seemed to seep into the bones. One night, alone in the law office, her computer flickered and the screen went black. When it blinked back on, there was a new file. No name, no timestamp. She opened it. Static. A voice, so faint she had to strain, whispering a single phrase. The same phrase Tyrell muttered before the cop vanished. "I see you." Cassie's breath caught. She replayed it. No background noise. No hint of who or what. But it felt like a warning. Or a promise. Then there was Jonah. Cassie's contact at the police department who claimed he was on their side. The one who had first leaked the footage. Jonah was jittery, eyes flicking to shadows that weren't there, voice low and clipped. "You want answers?" he said one evening, voice barely above a whisper. "You don't want to dig too deep. They don't just erase files. They erase people, memories, realities." Jonah swore he'd seen it. Officers who stopped existing after certain calls, citizens who couldn't remember moments they'd lived through, evidence that evaporated like mist. "You're chasing a ghost story wrapped in code," he warned. "And ghosts don't like to be hunted." Cassie wanted to believe him. But every conversation with Jonah left her wondering if he was the broken one, or if he was the only one telling the truth. Tyrell's own memories became a labyrinth, shifting and folding in on themselves. He would call Cassie late at night, his voice cracking. "I dreamt the stop again, but it's not the same. There's a woman there this time. She looks like my mother, but she's not. She says something I can't hear. And when I wake, I feel like I lost a part of myself." Cassie found herself searching through old family photos, newspaper clippings of Tyrell's mother who died decades ago. But no one else in his circle remembered the woman from his dreams, or maybe no one wanted to remember. The more they dug, the less sense the story made. The line between Tyrell's reality and something else, something beyond understanding, blurred until the edges bled. And in that bleeding space, fear lived. The real unsolved mystery wasn't just the stop or the missing officer. It was what had cracked open in Tyrell's mind, and maybe in all of theirs. The raw, bleeding truth behind what no one dares to say out loud. The part of the story hidden in plain sight, just beyond the edge of memory and sound. And just when it seemed like Cassie might crack the case, the files went dark again. This time, for everyone. Phones died, hard drives corrupted, evidence vanished, like it was never there. And in that silence, the only thing left was a message scrawled on a note slipped under Cassie's door, handwritten, trembling. "Remember who you are before it's too late." Because the question now isn't just what happened that afternoon on the roadside, but who is still real, and who was never supposed to be seen at all. The moment Cassie Monroe held the cracked open file in her hands, a strange calm settled over her, the kind that comes right before a storm breaks loose. The file was buried deep in the archives of a small, overlooked police department in Ohio, Tyrell's, hometown, and it was stamped with a date from nearly 20 years ago. Inside, she found an incident report that mirrored everything about the stop, the disappearance, even the whispers she and Tyrell had heard on static-laced recordings. A report on a traffic stop, a missing officer, and a driver whose name was scratched out, as if erased from existence. The eerie similarities hit her like a gut punch. The same cop, the same car model, even the same line the driver had whispered just before vanishing. It was all here, written in black and white, the hidden truth she'd been chasing. Her hands trembled as she read the details. Details no one had ever connected. Details that felt like a memory glitch surfacing from deep within the collective, unconscious. The driver in the old report was a black man named Harold, a community leader, whose disappearance had been written off as a tragedy buried under decades of bureaucratic indifference. But Cassie saw the patterns. The same missing footage, the same erased radios, the same cryptic whisper. "I see you." She felt like she'd uncovered a puzzle piece others had deliberately hidden in the shadows, the mystery uncovered that would finally unlock everything. Tyrell was the first person she called, his voice hollow but tinged with hope. "It's like looking at a ghost from my own life," he said, trying to steady himself. They pieced together the story. Harold had been stopped, questioned, and then vanished without a trace, his name scrubbed clean from records much like the officers'. Dashcam files had been wiped. The cold case had been buried beneath layers of silence and neglect until now. For the first time, they thought, they could see the full picture, the timeline, the motive, the man behind the badge who had walked away from both incidents like nothing happened, and for a moment it felt like justice might be within reach. Cassie dove deeper, combing through archives, interviewing old officers, and visiting the neighborhood where Harold had lived. Locals remembered the case but spoke only in hushed tones, as if the very mention of it might summon something worse than the truth. "He was taken by something no one wanted to name," one elder woman said, eyes distant. "We all thought it was over, but maybe it never was." But then the first crack appeared, a detail so small it almost went unnoticed. Harold's last known location was near an abandoned factory on the city's outskirts, a place whispered about in local legends. Cassie went there alone one evening, the weight of the past pressing down on her as the sky bled orange and purple. Inside the decaying structure, the air was thick with dust and old machinery creaking like a corpse settling into its grave. And, in a forgotten corner, she found a worn photograph taped to the wall. A family portrait, Harold in the center, but behind him, in the shadows, stood a figure with no face. Not blurred or obscured by light. No face at all. Just a smooth, dark void where eyes and mouth should be. A chill ran down Cassie's spine as a sudden realization hit her like a wave. The figure mirrored something she'd seen in the footage from Tyrell's stop. The shadow that flickered just out of focus, the shape that never fully belonged to the world they inhabited. This was no coincidence. Something, or someone, had been there all along, watching, waiting. A presence not bound by flesh or fear, but by something far deeper and more dangerous. Something that preyed on memory, that fed on silence, that thrived in the cracks between what we see and what we forget. The lines between past and present began to blur. Cassie remembered flashes from her own childhood, a night she'd buried deep in memory, a family dinner interrupted by a sudden, inexplicable power outage, the cold whisper of a voice she could never place, the way her parents' faces shifted in the dark, their eyes darting away from a question no one dared ask aloud. It was like recognizing a shadow behind your own eyes, a dread that no one told you was real. "You're not crazy," they lied to you, but before she could make sense of it, the ground beneath her shifted again. Back at her office, as she prepared to share her findings with Tyrell, her computer screen flickered wildly, then went black. The backup file containing the Harold case vanished from her drive. Every copy, every shred of evidence she'd collected, erased as if it had never existed. And then, on the cracked screen, a single line appeared, typed in a font that wasn't hers. The story isn't what you think. Rewatch. Remember. Cassie stared, heart pounding. It was a message and a warning all at once, a key to a puzzle that refused to stay solved. Because the deeper she dug, the more she realized that this was not just a mystery of missing men or corrupted files. It was a trap set by something that had been watching since the very first whisper, a force that was less an enemy to be fought than a shadow that lived inside their own minds. And in that moment, everything twisted. Every moment of the footage, every whispered word, every flicker of static became suspect. What if the disappearance wasn't a disappearance at all? What if Tyrell's name wasn't whispered in warning, but an invitation? What if Harold wasn't a victim but a player in something far more complex and terrifying? The air grew heavy, with dread, the kind that curls at the base of your skull and refuses to let go. Cassie felt it then, a sensation she couldn't shake, that the story she'd just uncovered was just the surface of a labyrinth designed to trap those who sought the truth. She looked at the screen again, the command clear: rewatch everything. And as the shadows lengthened in the room around her, she realized the nightmare wasn't over. It was only just beginning, because the deeper you go, the less you can trust what you see. And sometimes the most terrifying truths are the ones you've already forgotten you knew. They say the truth is a solitary thing, but as Cassie stared into the flickering glow of her now compromised screen, the first unsettling realization took root. She was not alone, not in this, not in the slow unraveling of what had seemed at first a straightforward unraveling of corruption and erasure. Across cities, states, and lives separated by time and space, others had been watching, waiting in the shadows where screens flicker, in inboxes never meant to be opened, and in dreams heavy with unspoken warnings. They had been silent, observers, trapped in the same dark web of memory and forgetfulness, united not by chance but by design. You were right all along. The fragments you thought were random were, in fact, pieces of a far older, far more deliberate pattern. The digital silence, shattered first with cryptic messages, the kind that defy easy explanation or dismissal. Cassie began receiving emails from anonymous senders, each containing a single image, a symbol drawn in blood-red ink, a twisted spiral intersected by 3 lines, reminiscent of something ancient yet eerily modern, like a brand seared into the subconscious. These images appeared not just in her inbox but woven into the fabric of public broadcasts and social media posts, almost subliminal, only discernible if you knew how to look. They were not random. They were a call, a shared language for those who understood the nightmare beneath the noise. Shared dreams followed. On nights when the city hummed with the usual indifferent pulse, a network of people awoke with the same haunting vision, a vast empty highway under an oppressive sky, a solitary figure standing in the distance whose face was never clear, but whose presence radiated something deep and irrevocable, something that felt like the slow erasure of self. The dreams carried the same whisper, barely audible but deeply insistent. Remember what they tried to take. These visions spread like wildfire through forums and dark corners of the web, gathering those who felt the edge of reality bending beneath them. Amid this growing murmur of dread and recognition, a third perspective emerged, a voice neither Cassie nor Tyrell had heard, but felt as if it was carved into the very air they breathed. An observer who claimed to have watched since the beginning, a watcher of watchers, holding a clarity that bordered on madness. This figure communicated through encrypted video uploads, grainy, shaky footage that showed nothing but close-ups of their own eyes, reflecting fractured images of Tyrell, the missing officer Bradham, and flickers of those same indecipherable symbols. Their message was chillingly simple. What the government never released was never meant to be found, but it's here now, hidden in the corners of your mind and the cracks of your history. The observer's words twisted the narrative further, seeding doubt about identity itself. Who were they? Were they a whistleblower, a victim, or a part of the machinery that spun this web? Their eyes held a painful weight, a knowledge that reality was not fixed but malleable, controlled by forces unseen, manipulating memories and perceptions with an expertise that rendered truth fluid. Memory is a weapon, they whispered in one upload, and control is the silence between the words. You never heard. As Cassie pored over the files and watched the growing network of watchers sharing their fragmented realities, a terrifying possibility took hold. The very sense of self, of who she was, might be a construct, an artifact manipulated by a force, so vast and insidious it had erased not just events but the people who witnessed them. Tyrell's fragmented memories, the erased footage, the lost voices, all signs of a system designed not only to hide but to rewrite. The question shifted from what happened to who was real and who was a ghost left behind to fill the spaces between lies, and the viewer, the one tracing every step, every whisper, every shadow, was pulled deeper into the labyrinth, becoming more than a witness but a participant. Each symbol on the screen, each glitch in the sound, each voice layered beneath the surface was an invitation to join a hidden conversation, to question the very fabric of reality, and to confront the unsettling truth that the story was never just about Tyrell or Bradham or even Cassie. It was about the slow, deliberate erosion of the self, the mind's battlefield where history is rewritten and identity is a fragile, fleeting thing. In the final frames of the latest upload, the observer's eyes locked with the camera, and their voice cracked with urgency and exhaustion. Look again, they said, because what you saw before, every frame, every whisper, was a shadow of the real. The truth is deeper, darker, and closer than you think. They've been watching you too. And the question isn't if you can trust them. It's if you can trust yourself. The screen cut to black, leaving the viewer alone with the echo of those words and the undeniable feeling that the entire story, everything unraveled and revealed, had to be rewatched, re-examined, lived again through the filter of doubt and fractured memory. Because in this tangled web of secrets, conspiracies, and lost truths, the only certainty was the unsettling conviction that the danger wasn't out there somewhere. It was inside, waiting to claim what was left behind when reality slipped just beyond reach. There comes a moment when the pursuit of truth no longer feels like a quest for answers, but an unraveling of everything you thought you were, an unspooling of identity that leaves you raw, trembling, and terrified of what the light might reveal. Cassie Monroe found herself standing on that edge, the weight of the unknown pressing so hard against her chest she could barely breathe. The mystery was no longer about the stop, the missing officer, or the erased memories. It was about why. Why had this darkness crept into their lives, weaving itself into the very fabric of their minds? What ancient, relentless force chose them, marked them, not for justice or vengeance, but for something far more intimate, an exposure of what it truly means to be human? Tyrell, once the stoic titan of industry, now a fractured man caught between shards of memory and nightmare, was no longer just a victim. He was a mirror reflecting the fragile, chaotic truth buried beneath the veneer of control. One evening, as Cassie sat across from him in a quiet, dimly lit room, the barriers he'd built crumbled. His confession came not as accusation or anger, but as a quiet surrender. "I don't know who I was before all this started," he whispered, voice cracked and raw. "Maybe I never was the man I thought I was. Maybe this—" He gestured around at the shadows dancing on the walls. "This erasure, this silence. It's not just about hiding a crime. It's about confronting a part of ourselves we're too afraid to face. The part that remembers the pain, the fear, the part that wants to disappear." In that moment, Cassie understood the terrifying duality of the truth before her. It was a door that could either consume or liberate, depending on whether they had the courage to walk through it. The unseen force that manipulated memories, erased evidence, and whispered through static was not some distant conspiracy. It was a reflection of humanity's deepest fears, of loss, of erasure, of the unbearable weight of history and identity. It was the part of themselves that everyone tried to silence, and she faced a choice: to chase the unraveling threads into the abyss, risking her own mind and soul, or to retreat into the comforting fog of ignorance that so many before her had chosen. The pressure was suffocating. To know the truth was to be forever changed, fractured but also possibly freed from the illusions that kept them all captive. Cassie's voice broke as she spoke her own confession, a trembling admission she hadn't dared to voice before. I'm scared that if I find the whole truth, I won't recognize myself afterward. What if the person I'm chasing isn't out there but inside me, waiting to be forgotten or remembered? Tyrell reached out, his hand trembling, grasping hers with a fragile desperation. Maybe we don't get to choose who we are. Maybe all we can do is face what's there and decide if we keep fighting or let the silence win. The room seemed to breathe with them, alive with the ghosts of forgotten names and erased moments. Outside, the city moved on, oblivious to the quiet revolution unfolding in a small, dim room, where history, memory, and identity collided. As Cassie stared at the blinking cursor on her screen, the final pieces of the puzzle refused to settle. The faces in the footage flickered like flames, some real, some imagined, all haunting. The observer's words echoed, "Look again." And so she did. Knowing the story she thought she understood was only the surface of something infinitely deeper and darker. The screen faded to black, leaving the viewer suspended in the raw, trembling space between knowing and not knowing. Memory and loss, truth and myth. And as the silence grew thick, a single haunting line whispered into the void, an echo meant to linger long after the screen went dark. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for stories you were never meant to hear. Until next time, remember, some truths don't want to be found.